Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. I hope you're all well. Today's video is going to be another true crime video. I did one last Wednesday and you all seem to really like it, and I seem to gain a few more subscribers from it. So hello if you're new and welcome back if you're old. If you like what I do, please give me a thumbs up. Also hit that subscribe button and hit the bell button and you get updated when I upload. I also have an Instagram, so head over and check that out because I always give you guys updates of when I'm uploading, and I sometimes give you reign of what I'm going to upload, so I'll give you guys the choice. So let's get into the video. Before I go any further guys, I just want to let you guys know I mean no disrespect to anybody that I speak about in this video. This is purely just something that I've researched and I'm now putting into my own words for you guys to now watch. Now this true crime actually starts in Wakefield. Wakefield is a small town in North Yorkshire. Isn't really famous for much. It's a small coaling industry town. Nothing really major goes on. There's the odd crime here and there, but nothing to really write home about. On the night of March 15th, 1994, in a small road called Bain Lane, this was to change forever. Lived here was Wendy Speaks. Wendy Speaks was a 51-year-old lady who lived alone. Wendy was known around the community as a lovely lady, really caring, very classy, independent, smart woman who'd brought up single-handedly two really strong, independent women. They were obviously older now, living their own lives, but they moved to Wakefield back when the children were young. Her and her husband got a divorce. They were both in the RAF, so they spent a lot of time travelling all around the world with the children. And then, as things do, things just deteriorated and they got a divorce. Their dad kind of went away and Wendy decided to bring the girls up on her own. They decided to set home in Wakefield, in Bain Lane. Eventually, like I said, the girls grew up, left home, and it was just left Wendy. Now, Wendy had a little job down a few miles away down the road, and she was a reception lady. Now, it was just a little 9-to-5 job, paid her bills, and she was happy doing that. She enjoyed going to work, and then she enjoyed looking forward to her weekends and her evenings with her family. She was also getting to that age where she was thinking about retirement, and she used to always tell the girls how she couldn't wait to just sit in her conservatory and listen to Rod Stewart. She was really close to her girls, and they were more like sisters than mother and daughters. They were known as the Three Musketeers. On March 16th, 1994, Wendy was due at work, but she didn't arrive. Her boss called her daughter Tracy. When she answered the phone, Tracy knew instantly that something was wrong. If her mum was unwell and couldn't make it to work that day, she would have definitely called and she wouldn't just leave someone hanging. So straight away, Tracy called her mum with no answer. Now Tracy lived a little bit further away from her mum, so she called her cousin. Her cousin went down to her home, and when she got there, the door was already open. She walked through. Normally, Wendy's a very house-proud lady. She would always have everything spick and span. But when she got there were shoes all over the floor. And when she called for her Auntie Wendy, there was no reply. She thought, something's definitely not right here, and there was just instant fear within her. She left the home and she instantly called the police. By the time that Tracy made it to her mum's house, there were police everywhere. Now at this point, Tracy didn't really know what was happening. She maybe thought her mum had a fall, had hurt herself, or she'd had a heart attack or something like that. But when she saw the mass of police, she knew something awful had happened. Inside the house, the police were observing what was now a crime scene. When they walked through the door, there was a blood spot on the frame. And when they went into the hall, they saw the shoes. When they went up the stairs in the left room, they discovered Wendy's dead body. She was slumped on her bed and covered in blood. She had been brutally raped and murdered. They discovered that she was actually raped by the semen on her body and the way that her clothes were all ripped. And she was also tied with a pair of stockings. She was also wearing a tatty blue pair of shoes, which looked really out of place because, as I said, she was a classy lady, she was very smart, very presentable. Also out of place were a black pair of court shoes. Now, after speaking to the family afterwards, they discovered that she was, like I said, a very tidy lady, but she was also very superstitious, and she always kept her shoes on the floor. From the fact that he'd made her wear these shoes, put the shoes up, and spread the shoes all over the house, he then became known as the Shoe Fetish Murderer. So downstairs, the police went and broke the devastating news that their mother had been murdered. They told the family that she'd been stabbed 11 times, 9 times in the back and shoulders and twice in the neck. Obviously, and quite understandably, the family were absolutely devastated. Their mum was their whole life and now she was gone at only 51 years old. Not only that, the whole of Wakefield were completely shocked. Now, nothing this major had ever happened in Wakefield since 1981. This is when the Yorkshire Ripper decided to go on his killing spree. He was obviously later then caught and then now serving life in prison. But it took police a long time to find the killer. So when they found out about Wendy Speak's murder, the pressure was really on for the police to find who had done this and stop him from doing it again. Police were looking at the crime scene and trying to find any clues to who or why this person would have done it. Now the police were speaking to their daughters and were trying to figure out what may have happened to their mum or who may have done this. Now, they already knew the guy, it was a guy because they were seamen. They already knew that he had a knife, a small knife, because there was a blood imprint on the pillow. The daughters also told the police that her mum never used the front door. She'd always used the back door. And any visitors going to the home would know that too, so they would either knock the back door or come through the back door. So the fact that the front door was open, police determined that it was probably a stranger who'd entered her house. Now, the police were looking at this crime scene and had determined that this guy had probably done something similar before, just to the sheer brutality of what had happened. He may not have killed before, but he definitely maybe raped or attacked somebody before. They decided to scout the whole of the crime scene to see if they could find fingerprints, to kind of run through the system to match up to this blood DNA and semen DNA that they had. The police obviously found loads of fingerprints, from Wendy's family to workmen that had been in to visitors and friends. So as you can imagine, they had to go through all of these fingerprints and match them to people that should have been in her house, i.e. work. So this took quite a long time. Not only that, whilst they were doing that with the fingerprints, they were also asking anybody who knew anything to come forward, but no one really knew anything. When they were doing the house-to-house inquiries in the days after the murder, they stopped and spoke to one man who saw a guy at Wendy's home. It was late that evening, around 5 PM, when he was just working on his garden. He saw a guy walk up to Wendy's house, knock on the door, and Wendy answered it. She was in her slippers, didn't seem scared by the guy at all, couldn't hear what they were talking about, but she had her arms crossed. Now, he didn't really think much of it, carried on with his gardening, and it wasn't until much later he looked up and he saw this guy leaving. He walked down the stairs, looked across the road, carried on walking, and then when he got round the corner, he then ran. It was after the man had seen all the police activity that he started to get nightmares and he was really stressing about it, and that's why he came forward to the police. The description the man gave of the man leaving Wendy's house was a tall guy with balding hair, and he had a grey jacket and grey top and like jeans on. So quite a generic description. The police decided to give this description to the public and just ask anybody to come forward if they think they know someone that looks like this. Then police had set up hotspots where people could go and voluntarily give their DNA, but still nothing was coming forward. Now, one fingerprint they did find in the house was a partial fingerprint just behind the door handle in the hall. They couldn't match it up to anybody that was in the house or should have been in the house. So they ran it through their database, but nothing came up. They couldn't save this on the fingerprint system. What happened is every month the fingerprint system would put this fingerprint through and it would give the top 100 matches. With those top 100 matches, officers would manually, personally look at these fingerprints to find a match, and they were just getting nothing. Police even went so far as to put a shoe fetish ad in the Daily Sport. The reason they did this is they just wanted to try and dwindle this guy out, and the fact that he seemed to have a shoe fetish, although many people do have that, not so many people would. They put a small quick ad with a number just saying shoe fetish, and they used a female officer as the voice. So men would ring this number, speak to this lady officer, and they would arrange to meet up. And police had a flat just down the road from the police station. The guys would go there thinking they were meeting this female person with nice shoes, I suppose, and when they got there they were actually greeted by 2 police officers. Now, they didn't get into trouble, they were just asked for a DNA sample. They were inundated with responses from this ad, and they took all this DNA from people and fingerprints, but still no match. As the investigation was going on, days turned into years, but every single month they would run this fingerprint through the system to see if it got a match, and month after month after month it didn't happen. Police detectives say there wasn't a day that went past that they didn't work on this case. So eventually, a lady in her early 20s came forward. The same night that Wendy was murdered, she had a knock at the door from a tall, balding man who was asking for directions to the local pub. Now, she'd just got in from work and she'd let the dog out, and she was, trying to get settled for the evening. So she tried to explain to the guy where this pub was when he asked for a pen and paper to write it down. To which she said, "It's really easy, I'll just explain and you can be on your way." So she explained where this pub was, to which he then replied, "Can I use your phone?" She said, "No, you can use the phone at the pub when you get there." To which he said, "The pub is closed." Now she knew full well at 5 o'clock on this Tuesday evening that the pub would definitely be open. It was their local pub, she just knew. So it was at that point she started to fear for her life. She knew he was up to something. She knew he was trying to get into the house and any excuse to kind of get in. And she started to step back and she just felt like he was going to lunge towards her when her dog barked. And that's when she realised, actually, I'm just going to shut the door on this guy. And she did. The police then determined that that was only an hour before Wendy was murdered. Another lady came forward with a very similar account. So the police were pretty sure this balding guy was the guy that they needed. Police even went as far as asking for DNAs from every bald person in Wakefield. People to this day still remember being asked to come into the police station just because they were bald. It became a bit of a joke around the community. But like I said, her family still didn't have closure. They still couldn't find this murderer. This was to change in 1996. A gentleman was at a bar talking to a lady. He'd been drinking, and after they were talking, he was bragging about driving home whilst being drunk and drink driving. The lady he was speaking to was actually a police officer. So when he left, she obviously rang the police and he was arrested for drink driving. He was arrested and taken to the police station where he had to give fingerprints, he had to give, everything that you have to give at a police station. And he was charged with drink driving. Now this was on a Friday night, and something that the police found strange was he had court on the Monday morning. Now normally they'd let that person go on bail and they'd have to arrive in court at 9 o'clock on the Monday morning. He elected to stay in the police station over the weekend. That's just strange behaviour. So they went with it anyway. He went to court on the Monday morning. He was disqualified from driving. Then in 2000, a officer that was scanning the fingerprints and going through the fingerprint database, and they were still at that point putting this fingerprint through the system every month to find out if they could find it. He got a match and it came up #1 on the top 100. So this guy took it out and did a manual search on it like they did every time, and it was a match. Now the reason that this guy got the match is because each officer will look at a different part of the print to search every single time, and they rotate each time. So it just happened that he looked at the right patch at the right time. Now this fingerprint actually belonged to the drink driver before, which makes it even more strange. Perhaps he didn't want to go home on bail because he didn't want to give an address, or it's all just a bit strange. And they also found out that he didn't apply for his driving licence after his disqualification had finished, which is, again, a bit strange. This guy was Chris Farrow. Now, Chris Farrow, at the time of his arrest, was living in Bradford. He was a tall guy, he was balding, he was very normal, he was a painter and decorator, seemed to keep himself to himself, he had a partner, and he seemed to just be getting on with life. Police were really shocked to find such a meek guy behind this murder. But obviously all they had was the fingerprint. They didn't want to go in too heavy-handedly, and they didn't really know if he'd still lived at the address that they had. So they did a bit of surveillance with him, and yeah, he still lived at the address that he gave in court. So they went round there and they arrested him. So even more strange than all of the other things that I've told you is when he was arrested, he didn't say anything. It was early morning, police went in and arrested him for the murder of Wendy Speaks in 1994, to which he didn't ask any questions, he didn't profess his innocence, he just went with it. He was taken into the station and police started interviewing him. So when they first started interviewing Farrow, they didn't disclose that they had any kind of information on him, they just started interviewing him. And one of the questions that they started with was, "Have you ever been to Wendy Speaks' house?" To which he answered, "No." Now the reason the police wanted to ask him whether he'd been in there is to kind of give him a chance to give an alibi. They knew they had the fingerprint, but if he came back and said, "Oh, I did some work for her, I was a painter and decorator," he then had an alibi. But by him saying no, when they then give him the DNA, he can't come back on that. He's just said no, so why now are you saying that you were in there? Does that make sense? So they asked him for a second time, "Have you ever been in Wendy Speaks' house?" To which he said no. Then the police told him that they had his DNA at the crime scene. To which point the police kind of thought he wasn't going to say anything, it was going to be a hard kind of task to get the truth out of him, but he didn't. He just bowed his head and said, "Yeah, it was me." So police were like, "Okay, cool, like at least we know who it was." When police asked why did he do it, he said, "I was having a bad day and my then partner was 6 months pregnant. I wasn't having any sex and I was just getting frustrated. Like I said, I had a bad day and someone was just going to get it that day. To which the police officer said, "Get it, what, you were going to go out and kill someone?" He said, "No, I'm not a murderer, I meant rape." So even at that point, he was still a little bit touched. He didn't understand that he'd murdered someone, but in his mind he'd just raped someone and the murder bit didn't matter. It was strange. So he was charged with murder of Wendy Speaks, and the family were told and they explained who he was, etc, etc. And Tracy actually said he's such a meek man, he's such a weak individual, and he is. He had a bad day and he thought it was okay to go and rape a lady who had everything to live for and then murder her and just take her life away. In November 2000, the trial began for Christopher Farrow. The whole of the courtroom was packed with press. As I said, it was the biggest major crime that had happened since the Yorkshire Ripper. All of Wendy's friends and family arrived, and the mood was electric. They had finally found, after nearly 6 years, the murder of their mother and the murder of Wendy Speaks. Police had worked so hard to find him, so everyone was really kind of ready to see this guy go down. So when the trial started, the judge asked if he was guilty or not guilty, and he said guilty. And the police described it as a little bit of an anticlimax, because that was that. There was no reason of why he gave it. There was no apology to the family or to Wendy. There was no apology to anyone. He just said guilty. He didn't look at anybody. He didn't show any remorse. And everyone was kind of left a little bit deflated. The most chilling response was when the judge asked him if he had anything to say. He said, "I just wanted someone to suffer the way I did," which is just mental. Now, Farrow was actually charged with the murder of Wendy Speaks, the rape of Wendy Speaks, and then he had 2 further charges of burglary with the intent to rape. So altogether he had 4 charges. For these, he got life imprisonment, but would serve a minimum of 18 years, which means technically he could come out on parole any day now. Now, this obviously infuriates the whole of Speaks' family and the police, and from what I've gathered, there's very, very little chance he'll ever be let out. However, Tracy said if he is let out, mark my words, he will kill again. That's the end of this case, guys. I hope you enjoyed this video. I'm really enjoying doing it. They take a lifetime to kind of prep for, but I do actually really enjoy kind of telling the stories, and I love watching kind of true crime YouTubers. So I hope you do enjoy this, guys. Let me know what you think about this case down below. Please comment, it does help me out. Give me a thumbs up as well. And like I said, if you want to see more videos like this, please subscribe. I upload on a Wednesday at 5 PM, which is normally my true crime upload. And I also upload on Sunday at 9 AM, which is normally, at the moment, wedding based stuff, but you know, a little bit more fun, upbeat stuff. So yeah, I hope you enjoyed this video, guys. I'll speak to you soon. Bye.